To be a very, very important debate on a motion that calls on the House to express a lack of confidence in possibly the most important minister in a government of Trinidad and Tobago at a time like this. Madam Speaker, it is not a motion that one would look at and speak with pleasure. It is not something that we are elated to be here to condemn, using the standing orders, a parliamentary colleague in the exercise of the discharge of his official functions. It is something we take very seriously. And let me begin by congratulating the opposition leader for the courage, the tenacity, the competence in presenting this motion this morning and raising substantive issues concerning the conduct. Madam Speaker, this matter, if we do not watch it, we can easily derail this, as the last speaker sought to do. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if we are not cautious, we can derail this debate, as the last speaker sought to do, on a debate on exemption and COVID. This is not a debate on exemption and COVID. This is a debate about the conduct of the Minister of National Security in the discharge of his public functions. It involves every area in his department where we can argue in the most compelling manner that he has failed and failed miserably to reach even modest performance targets in every specific area of his ministry. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister before me asked the question and was responding by saying that it is not the Minister of National Security alone, it is the Cabinet, and we ought not to be taking on the Minister this way. It should be the government and the Prime Minister. And we asked the question because the Minister of National Security said this morning that there was a committee between the Minister of Health, the Prime Minister, and himself, and they determine all matters related to the management of the pandemic and the exemption policy. Did the Prime Minister exempt his own daughter to come into Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes. 1 second. Members, please remember the proper protocols. All masks must be properly worn at this time, please. Please.
Thank you. So the question begs itself, were members of the government participating in a committee or subcommittee and then took decisions to benefit their own family members? The member for the Port of Spain North Minister of National Security, truly, if ever we had to take a picture and make a poster for a statement, it would be an all-wrong failure. An all-wrong failure. Made a fascinating statement this morning. He said, I want to thank all my colleagues for their support. I want to thank the Prime Minister. I want to thank everybody because what I do is not myself, you know. It is the mandate of colleagues who support me. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was shocked to hear this statement, and like a Senate colleague of mine, I almost screamed if I had his voice. What? But I don't. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have in my hand here what is a screenshot of what is popularly called a WhatsApp chat. And this WhatsApp chat, which I got on a website a few minutes ago, speaks of members of parliament. I have in my hand, I'm not displaying. And on January 19th, it is a Tuesday at 8:41 a.m., someone by the name of Stuart Young, and I use that name because this is what is on the WhatsApp screenshot. That person says, we are already there, except we don't keep everyone for 14 days, but 7 in state quarantine and state supervised quarantine, where you pay, and then 7 days at home. That is the difference. And someone, and this is very important, someone by the name of Foster Cummins, there is a member for La Hoqueta who carries a name very familiar. And that person says, I do not share the view that our citizens and permanent residents should be subject to an exemption to return home. Many of our citizens are still stranded abroad and have not been able to access the exemption almost after 1 year. This is by someone that carries the name Foster Cummins. Although we are in a pandemic, We cannot render our citizens stateless. We can require them to have the negative PCR tests and quarantine at their own expense, but we need not allow we need to allow our citizens to come home and come home now. That is a remarkable screenshot from a chat called Members of Parliament, and I recognize other names here as colleagues who are time and time again sit opposite me in this house. There is a war in the cabinet. They are fighting among themselves in the cabinet over exemption policy. They come and put on a brave face today. Yes, they resign because of that. Today, they put on a brave face and say all of us agree, and this is what is happening January 19th, which I believe is a few days ago. The General Secretary of the party, Minister of Government, Cabinet member is saying to the Minister of National Security, you are doing something that is wrong, and I will not go and say an unparliamentary word. You are doing something that is wrong. So that in their cabinet, they are fighting over this very policy and process. But today, they try to tell the entire population, we are united, we know what we are doing. The person calling himself Stuart Young said, well, we can't do nothing about this, we in it already. That is the approach to policy making. And this can be found on our website, I'm sure, that we can see. Incidentally, after that quarrel, one Foster Cummins left the chat. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is the unity they talk about when the Prime Minister says, we make decisions together. Together we make decisions. Mr. Deputy Speaker, notwithstanding the war in the cabinet over this matter, I will now raise another matter because, you know, in anticipation of my approach to the podium, the Minister of National Security, the Attorney General, and I suspect the unprepared Minister for Laventille West, they all raised this issue before me of the helicopter. But before I go to the helicopter, I just wanted to ask the Minister of National Security, he has colleagues who will speak later, I'm sure, clarify for me once and for all. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from my experience of 20 years in this House plus, I am aware that this is a substantive motion on a member of the House. It is the only day in our life when this is done. It is the only time you can raise a matter that questions the conduct, the behavior of a member of the government. It must be done on a substantive motion, otherwise you cannot raise issues of character and conduct. We are here today. I waited a long time for this. And I asked the Minister of National Security, did you induce, influence, seek to bully the Chief Fire Officer or any agent of the Chief Fire Officer to write a report on West Moorings Towers to clear the residents of wrongdoing, including yourself and your parents, when you were blocking the corridor and creating a danger and a risk to the lives of children, elderly, and other residents, that corridors and exit routes were blocked. The fire service on December 2nd did a report and said, demanded that residents move their things and create a freeway. It was not done. Notwithstanding it was not done, the fire service issued another report when they learned who were the residents in question on floor 8. And if threatened further, I will produce the pictures. I will produce the official reports, the record, and the stamp dated pictures to tell you the conduct of a member of this House. I notice nobody responds to that one. Mr. Deputy Speaker, you know, all of that is bad. It's bad, I must say. Everything about managing immigration, managing every part of that ministry, horrible. But I focus on one matter, because it is a matter that falls squarely at the feet of the minister. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when they came into office in September 2015, they went on a political rampage to discredit the former administration, to discredit, to demonize, to criminalize ministers and the former Prime Minister from Siparia. That was their mission. Man, they took on that mission with evangelical zeal. Anything they found, once it was UNC partnership, it was bad. It could be the Ramai Trace Hindu School. It could be the Children's Hospital. It could be the school in Princestown, Reform. But it was bad because the UNC partnership did it. They came into office, informed that there was a contract signed properly, signed and entered to, for the lease of 2 helicopters. They then told the country that no helicopter arrived. The helicopter never arrived. It had none here. It was left to us a few weeks ago to produce a photograph that showed a helicopter in a shed in Komoto, park up for 5 years, as we would say, absolutely nothing. All they do is they go on, and Trinidad language, they rev the engine every now and then. Not using it. Civil aviation had no authority to enter that compound to certify or do registration. So it's not flying. We produced the picture. No one has said that that is not the picture. Lo and behold, we hear now of a court case in America, sovereign immunity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have in my hand, look here, 2 documents. One is a response from the Trinidad and Tobago. One is a response from the Trinidad and Tobago government through Freshfield, their lawyers. The other is, of course, the United States District Court, Southern District of New York, vertical aviation versus the government of Trinidad and Tobago. This makes for amazing reading. Amazing. What they have done, I don't have time now in this debate to tell you, but what they have done is taken the approach they did in Trinidad. When contractors sue this government for outstanding monies, instead of paying or negotiating or entering into arrangement, they say, hello, you see that? That have bubble in it. We're not paying. You know, they tried the same story in New York. When they did not pay, they defaulted on paying rent. The caution money, as we say, went to pay rent. They did not pay insurance. They did not take a maintenance contract under Ministry of National Security. No, what is called tip-to-tail maintenance contract. No insurance. You know, in UWI, some of us, when we were there, we put a caution money, and if we don't pay rent, the landlord take the caution money for rent. That happened.
I allowed enough response, but this matter is now...
But you raised it!
Yes, but in... Mr. Deputy Speaker, may I? Mr. Deputy Speaker, if I may, please. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I raised 48.2 in the depth and detail of defense matters that the honourable member is going into, because the matter is before the courts of New York at this point. I do accept that there was a need to reply. None of us spoke in such a fashion as to take it in any depth, and I make that submission for your consideration.
Again, member, tie it in quickly, please. Tie it in, and again, no in-depth information.
Sure. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will say now, I'm not reading from any of the documents that I have before me. I will make 2 points about it and end.
No. Even though you are not reading, again, I would like you to tie in the point.
Okay.
Tie in the point quickly and move on based on the AG's comments.
I am raising a point that squarely connects to the conduct and the performance in office of the Minister of National Security, who had sole responsibility for national security assets, such as helicopters. Sole responsibility. We really can't blame nobody else. So the minister went now with a cock and bull story that there's something wrong with the lease, that we have to investigate. I am informed that a few days ago...
Member, I would like you to move on, right? I give you enough leeway. I'd like you to move on.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, could I speak about a foreign affairs matter related?
What aspect of it? What aspect of it?
The minister told us he wrote the Department of Justice. I'm going to argue that he has wrote nothing, and this is not an active matter between the United States Department of Justice and the Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, you can move on now, member. Move on now. You can move.
Can I argue that?
You made your point, you can move on.
Okay, well then I'll move on then. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, leaving that aside, I will get to the next point. This minister has also presided over this debacle with migrants and so on. I have in my hand again documents pertaining to claims made by persons, and I will not get into detail. I'm not calling name and court judgment and so on. But it is a fact that a high court judge ruled that there ought to have been no more deportations, no deportation orders, pending the outcome of matters before the court on persons who were before the court. The minister presided over a state of affairs that issued deportation orders to almost 41 persons, who, if they go to court and win, can cost the taxpayer $100 million in damages. But the matter I can't talk about, it is another $100 million in damages that we can face because of incompetence, malice, spite. This is the nature of what we are speaking about, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this minister has a habit. He has a habit of shooting from the hip, as we say in Western language. When you are Minister of National Security, you cannot have that habit. You will get yourself and the government and the taxpayer into trouble. A Minister of National Security ought not to be intemperate, certainly not arrogant, not a person who quick to open their mouth. In opening his mouth on the matter I can't talk about, he has incurred liability, has made critical statements that undermines the interests of Trinidad and Tobago. Hypothetically, Mr. Deputy Speaker, without reference to any point, hypothetically, if you say that your lawyers tell you you don't have a case, how will you go to court on a default judgment to fight a default judgment when you have said in the public that your lawyers said you don't have a case to answer? You have no case, no defense. So you said in the public you have no defense, and now fighting a matter somewhere where you are fighting a default judgment against you. That is when your mouth open and you put your country in trouble and crisis. You put your taxpayer in crisis. And this is what the minister stands guilty of today. So no amount of telling us about, what the UNC did. This is fascinating today. If somebody would just come in here with an exemption policy that allows them as a diplomat to go home, if they're just coming today, they would feel this is a motion of no confidence in the UNC or the member for Siparia. They would not know this is a motion of no confidence in the Minister of National Security if they hear members opposite. We challenge him, tell us one area of your department, your ministry, that you can claim some success. Today, they are speaking, Mr. Deputy Speaker, about the lowest crime rate and all-round failure, if ever there was one. Today, very interesting, everybody's standing up. I noticed in the newspaper a few days ago, crime statistics, crime down,
Remember,
lowest
you have 2 more
whatever.
minutes.
Yeah.
2 more minutes.
Thank you very much. Lowest data in X year. I think the data they're using is 2020. We had a state of emergency for 3 months. When we told them murder down, they said that don't count because there was a state of emergency. We are in a lockdown and a self-imposed lockdown, the entire nation for 1 year. And they are saying the lowest crime rate ever. But even the bandits, kidnappers, everybody feared COVID. So that you have reduced activity. You have reduced activity at all levels, whether it's an illicit sector or a legal sector. But you cannot boast that in 2020, when people park up home, when you don't want your brother to visit your house, you say, well, crime down, crime down. Who committed the crime? Huh? COVID positive people? So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this, and I have a search now. This minister, I would tell him, I don't know how else to say, but for the Minister of National Security, the word honesty has no clear meaning. None. This is a minister that, according to a document I have before me, they say he strains credulity. I had to look up that word. So, it is a minister that defies us in so many ways. A front page editorial of the Express had to point him and call him out. A talk show host in Barbados had to make him the subject of attention day and night over statements there, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So that what we are here to do is to call on this minister to resign. You cannot continue like this. You are straining the country. You are an all-round failure. And you have brought this country to its knees in terms of dealing with crime. Other colleagues will yet to talk about management of assets, talk about budgeting, talk about the fact that today you go from one point to the next point, you're not sure to see national security assets on the road because we have not maintained them. The police have not received the monies to maintain cars, to buy cars. We have not. They made a national scandal over helicopter. When today I'm hearing again, they said the helicopter was bought for VIP. Do you know it takes 15 minutes to refit a helicopter with no charge? You could use it for anything you want. But today we have to
Member?
listen to the sickness, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And quite frankly, those on this side are well disgusted by the conduct of the government. I thank you.
I recognize the member for St. Joseph.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is painful to listen to the opposition in the throes of their insecurity and having to defend a motion piloted by the leader of the opposition that has no substance.